Do you know that there are 38,000 suicides a year in the United States alone? Another way of saying that is one death every 15 minutes as a result of suicide. Mental illnesses are the #1 cause of suicides, being accountable for up to 90%. Now that I have your attention, let's get right into it. Mental illnesses are unfortunately becoming very common, as every 1 in 5 people will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. Even though they seem like they're one of the new disorders, they're actually one of the oldest, first dating back to the ancient Greek time period. So if they've been around for this long, how come we don't have a cure for them yet? Well, that is because it's only been recently that we actually started researching into the brain further. Many years ago, if you had a mental illness, you would have been thrown into a psychiatric hospital, or sometimes known as a mental asylum. They would be lobotomized or sterilized, as well as heavily sedated to control and prevent the spread of the disease. This resulted in losing personal independence and dignity. By now you're probably asking, how can we do this to someone? Well, the answer is that as a species, humans fear the unknown, and until recently, the brain was never researched. Mental illnesses are more than just simply behavioral struggles, but are rather an improper wiring of the brain's circuit. Now that we understand that people affected by mental illnesses are still humans, we have begun to spend some money on the research and technologies required to get a closer look at the brain itself. Thomas Insel is a director of the National Institute of Mental Health and focuses time researching mental illnesses in order to treat, prevent, and understand them to a higher degree. Before Dr. Insel joined the NIMH, he was a professor of psychiatry at Emory University, as well as being in charge of the Center of Behavioral Neuroscience. He plays a part on multiple academic, scientific, and professional committees, earning himself a spot on the ISI's top 200 neuroscientists, gaining him credibility in this specific field. Throughout his TED Talk, he explains that his #1 goal is to end the negative stigmas that go along with mental illnesses, in hopes to have more people seek help early. After all, we know the idea early detection is equal to early response. Thomas Insel's discussion is about the severity of mental illnesses, how common they really are, and what steps need to be put in place in order to correct the increasing numbers of infected individuals. He raises a very important question in his presentation. Why do we call them behavioral disorders and not brain disorders? After all, that is what they are. From here, he begins to explain his professional opinion of why he believes that it is important that the name of these disorders is changed from mental illnesses to brain disorders. He believes that by doing so, society will realize how severe they really are, and hopes that this will also end the negative stigma. Thomas Insel believes that if society started thinking of them as brain disorders, then they would realize that they're not something the individual can control, and are not just the affected individual being moody. The presentator, Dr. Insel, used a variety of oral presentation techniques, such as statistics, visuals, as well as intermediate conclusions, to keep the attention of the audience, which will allow them to take in as much information as possible, in hopes that they will take away with them a new understanding of what mental illnesses actually are. The use of these techniques drastically improved the effectiveness of his overall presentation. By opening up his presentation with statistics, he automatically received the attention of the audience, as the statistics he was using were about well-known diseases and their death rates, and this shocked the audience. He immediately followed it with a comparison between well-known disorders and mental illnesses. By comparing a well-known disorder with a less well-known disorder, it allowed the audience to understand how severe of a subject matter this truly is. Now that the audience is aware of the theme of the presentation, mental illness, he begins to state the message or lesson he is trying to get across. Dr. Insel was able to do this with the use of visuals to go along with his message. On the projector behind him, he included a very simple graph showing the mortality rates for cancer and heart attacks compared to the mortality rates of suicide due to mental illnesses. This graph allowed the audience to see how commonly suicide is used as the answer for people affected with mental illnesses. The benefit of having both a visual and his oral speech is that it is able to get across to both visual as well as auditory learners widening his chances of the message getting across. After he's done talking about the mortality rate, he uses an intermediate conclusion to summarize what he just said so far before moving on to the second part of his message. The reason why this is so important is because the audience tends to lose their focus on the presentations about a third of the way through. But by using intermediate conclusions throughout the presentation, it allows the audience to still understand the gist of the information by listening to the little summary at the end. This is a strategy that Dr. Insel very effectively used by separating his material into separate sections to allow the audience to understand the most out of the presentation. The second section within his presentation is about his professional opinion to change the name from behavioral to brain disorders. He explains to the audience that by referring to them as brain disorders, it will shine a new light on them and hopefully end the stigmas around them. This is an important step because 76 to 85% of affected individuals do not seek help. His conclusion follows this message, and he summarizes the main messages and restates his theme that he wants people to take away with them. The combination of the oral presentation techniques makes his presentation a success. His use of oral presentation techniques, a very important message with a possible solution, and his credibility on the topic make it clear that he was confident in his presentation. He never once used any filler words such as did not rely on reading off of paper, had excellent stage presence using the space effectively without pacing, as well as his use of slides at the right time to add extra emphasis to his main arguments. For these reasons, I believe Dr. Insel is a very exceptional and confident presenter with this material. One tip, however, I think he could have included to improve his presentation would have been to use a real-life example of a person with some mental illness, as this may allow the audience to relate better to a not very well-known subject matter and to reveal their inner sympathy towards the matter. All in all, I believe he did an excellent job with his presentation. The reasons why mental illnesses cause such controversy are because the brain is a very complex organ built up of 100 trillion synapses and 100 billion neurons that we do not have a lot of information about so far. Technologies and research have only recently been introduced for this particular part of our body because for a long time the medical funding was going towards physical disorders as opposed to mental disorders. As humans, we have a hard time understanding the severity of a disorder of the brain because we haven't yet been able to see it until recently. When a bone is broken, we can physically see that right away and we know that we need to fix it. However, because the brain is the organ of knowledge and reason, it struggles to detect any deficiencies within itself. The disorder has already been present and causing damage long before any behavioral symptoms are manifested. Historically, society has judged those affected based on the behaviors of mentally ill individuals by negative labels such as lunatics, psychos, and retards. Due to the way we treated them in the past, both personal and public stigmas have been created. Personally, we feel ashamed to admit we are affected and to appear mentally weak or incapable. Publicly, we see these stigmas are in place because we are often seeing mental illnesses are associated with crime and violence in the media. Now, because these affected individuals feel the need to hide their disorders so they're not bullied or thought of as lesser, many of them look to suicide as a way out. And an unfortunate example of this is the actor and comedian Robin Williams, who passed away August 11, 2014. He was a man who was seen as a famous and successful entertainer. His fans and family were all equally shocked to have heard about his suicide as a result of years of struggling with a mental illness. The stigmas affected Robin because he felt the pressure to live up to his model of success that he established over the many years in the spotlight. His death has reinforced the idea that mental health is an important issue that we need to be able to openly talk about and listen to. Many celebrities, athletes, and businesses have used their influence to promote education and awareness of these disorders. An example of this is Bell Let's Talk Day, which takes advantage of social media to spread the word and campaigns to end the stigma around mental illness, with funds being directed towards research and knowledge. This is a very important step to end the controversy over mental illnesses and to help end the negative stigmas. Dr. Insel is optimistic that through further research and emerging technologies, the scientific community will be able to make drastic advances in the understanding and political treatment of brain disorders. I believe that the presenter, Dr. Insel, focuses on the controversial topic of negative stigmas that go along with mental illnesses, added to the overall impact of his presentation. Negative stigmas have an enormous impact when addressing mental illnesses as a subject, because they are the main issue that stands in the way of more affected people seeking help or treatment. Research has shown in other diseases that early detection can improve the overall well-being of the affected. The removal of the stigmas towards mental illnesses can contribute to the possibility of successful treatment and reduce numbers of those impacted. In conclusion, I personally believe that mental health is a very important subject matter that tends to be underestimated. This is a personal matter for me, as I have had friends and family members who have been affected by mental illness, and I'm not alone in being able to say this. Unfortunately, more than half the population will be affected by mental illnesses in their lifetime. Thomas Insel did a very good job presenting his TED Talk because of his use of a variety of oral presentation techniques, such as his use of images, statistics, as well as intermediate conclusions. He did an amazing job of addressing the controversy being the negative stigmas that go along with mental illnesses, and laid down the problem followed by a possible solution. His point of changing the term to brain disorder is a very interesting idea, as this may actually spark society to start taking them more seriously. With more funding and new technologies, our understanding of mental illnesses will greatly increase over the next few years, which will improve the quality of life an affected individual would have. For these reasons, I believe that Thomas Insel did a fabulous job of informing his audience about a very important subject matter, and did an excellent job of describing in easy terms why we need to start taking mental illnesses more seriously, starting today.